Hello and how you doing, and welcome back to another episode of Two Jagoffs. I am your host, Austin Cairns. And ladies and gentlemen, here on the podcast today, I am joined by yet again a very special guest making his first ever appearance here on Two Jagoffs. He has loads of experience working with the Pittsburgh Pirates, working in Minnesota with the Timberwolves and the Twins, and even spent some time with the Texas Rangers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Robby Incmikoski. Robby, how's it going? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us here on Two Jagoffs.
You know, Austin, I'm honored to be here. I think it's really cool. You have a beautiful studio, and
Thank
I
you.
love what you do here at Point Park University. But I have one question.
Of course.
Does this mean I'm the other Jagoff?
That means you're the other Jagoff today.
I am.
You're the honorary Jagoff
So
today.
I get to be a guest on your podcast and be called a Jagoff right off the top of the show.
Absolutely. Doesn't that feel awesome?
I'm honored. I love this. I mean, you got the cup right here.
Yep.
It says Two Jagoffs and fancy pillows. I love it, man. Thank you for having me, Austin.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And I think we should just dive right into this, not waste any more time. So I have on here, you went to Temple University. You got a bachelor's degree in elementary education and teaching. How did you get a degree in that but end up in the sports world? Where did your love and passion for sports begin?
You know, it's an interesting question. When I was a kid, I used to roam around and collect aluminum cans for money. This is years ago, back in the mid-'80s, long before you were born. And I used to roam around the old Veterans Stadium where the Philadelphia Eagles played their games and where they practiced. And I snuck into the Eagles practice back in the day and got to know some Eagles people and became became a ball boy for the Eagles in 1987. And then stayed around for a while and got to meet some people in my time. And then I went to college. Now, my mother was a teacher for many, many years, and I wanted to follow my mother's footsteps as a teacher, elementary school teacher. I thought it was pretty cool, and you had summers off. Didn't make a ton of money, but still, it was a nice way to make a living, and you could impact the younger lives. So I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then I realized at some point in time, I would like to teach, but maybe further down the road. For a career, I wanted to pursue broadcasting in some way, shape, or form. And I had a relationship with a guy who played for the Eagles, a guy named Brian Baldinger, who's now a broadcaster and has been doing that for almost 30 years now. He played until, I believe, 1995 or 1996, so this might be his 30th year in broadcasting. And he got me in. He got me a few jobs as a day hire in the TV truck for the NFL and Fox where he worked. And that's where the fire lit inside me to become a broadcaster. And the rest, they say, is history. So a lot of people have asked that question, why I have an elementary education degree and never took a broadcasting class in my entire life. And that's how it ended up happening. So I'm living proof that you don't really have to have a broadcast degree to be a broadcaster or necessarily take broadcasting classes.
Wow, that's amazing, especially as someone who's currently here at Point Park right now taking nothing but broadcasting classes and taking nothing but those kind of classes.
Well, you're ahead of the game because you're already doing you're still a student, right?
I am still a student.
So as a student, you're already hosting podcasts.
Yep.
I never had a microphone in my hand until I was 27 years of age.
Wow.
So you're already way ahead of the game getting these reps now as a college kid. And I didn't get a chance to do it until I was in arena or in stadium MC for the Bowie Bay Sox, a AA baseball team in Maryland, until I was almost 30 years old.
Wow, that's awesome. I want to kind of fast forward a little bit and go to your time in Minnesota. You spent about 3 years there with the Twins. And 4 years.
Yep.
Spent about some time with the Twins and the Timberwolves. What was that like up there being able to work in Minnesota before you made the transition back here in Pittsburgh?
You know, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and here's why. And you're going to experience this in your career as you go on as a broadcaster. Not as a student, but once you start making money as a broadcaster full time. I got a chance to work the final year of the Metrodome in 2009 as a team reporter for the Minnesota Twins. And then I got to work the first season of Target Field, their current home, in 2010. And I'll never forget the first day, April 12th, 2010, in Minnesota, when the Twins played the Red Sox. And it was one of the coolest moments of my life, seeing a fan base that wanted to see outdoor baseball for the first time in almost 30 years because they had spent all that time in the Metrodome. And Minnesota summers are beautiful and gorgeous, but if you're an employee, a player, a coach, a trainer, an equipment guy, you really stop seeing daylight the second you walked into the ballpark. And now here we are having outdoor baseball at Target Field, and there were multiple generations of baseball fans in Minnesota that wanted to see outdoor baseball. So it was really, really cool. And I got to spend 4 seasons working with the Twins, 2009, 10, 11, and 12, before I came to Pittsburgh to work the 2013 season with the Pirates as their TV reporter. So it was a really cool experience working up there. They're really passionate fans like they are here in Pittsburgh. The Twins have had a little bit more success recently than the Pirates have had in recent years, but still, nonetheless, great passion for baseball, great passion for sports, and a lot of people. It's not a transient city. A lot of people that live there are from. If they're not from Minnesota or Minneapolis, they're from somewhere up in the upper Midwest, whether it's the Dakotas, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, somewhere around there. Just like you get a little bit here in Pittsburgh, a lot of people that are from, Western PA and beyond, but still, within a half decent drive of the city of Pittsburgh.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to move over to Pittsburgh now. So you spent a lot of time here in Pittsburgh, most of your career actually as the Pirates TV reporter, and you also were a host for the Pittsburgh Penguins for some time as well.
I was.
What was that like, being able to work here in the Steel City? Because I've had several different broadcasters on, Rob King, Bill Hillgrove, and the thing that they've always told me is no matter where you go, you're always going to find your way back here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Rob's a real jerk, isn't he? I worked with Rob for 11 years, and he was an absolute terrible human being to me.
Terrible human.
Yeah.
I guess we have to abolish him from Two Jagoffs then. Maybe delete that episode.
No, Rob. You see this? You're a Jagoff. I'm kidding. You know what? I want to tell you something about the city of Pittsburgh, Austin. Are you from Pittsburgh?
I am from Pittsburgh.
Where are you from?
I'm from Carnegie.
So just 15 minutes from here.
15 minutes.
Yep. So let me tell you this. Rob King, and he's from Cooperstown, New York. He's from upstate New York, and he's been here for, I want to say 25 years. I think it was around 2000 when he came to Western Pennsylvania, he and his wife, Megan. And Rob King is arguably one of the top 3 favorite humans I've ever worked with in my entire life. That's why I bust his balls so much, because he's the kindest, most wonderful teammate anybody can have, and he was a big reason why I had a smooth transition coming to Pittsburgh and working with the Pirates. He pulled me aside right away and basically gave me a lot of background with the team, 20 straight losing seasons coming into it. Gave me a heads up on some stories that I might come upon that may have already been told. And I can't tell you how far that went with me as a guy who was new to the city. I wasn't new to baseball. It was going to be my 5th season working in Major League Baseball, and I'm thankful to have worked 16 seasons in baseball. But Rob was a big reason why the transition was so smooth. And there's a reason why I mentioned Rob King, because he's not from Pittsburgh, right? Mm-hmm. And he spent, at that time, he was here for, I want to say 12 or 13 years at that time. And he treated me as if I belonged right away. And that is kind of indicative of how the city of Pittsburgh is and how people treat people. Here's a guy that's not even from there, but treats people the way I've become accustomed to being treated in Western Pennsylvania. As I mentioned before, a lot of people are from here. There's a Pittsburgh way. There's a Pittsburgh accent. You said two yins, you say yins, two Jagoffs, right?
Yep.
When I say Jagoff outside the city of Pittsburgh, nobody has any idea what I'm talking about.
No, it's the blank stare.
Right, and Jagoff is almost a term of endearment in the city of Pittsburgh.
It is.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's real cool with the way I've been treated here. And to be quite frank with you, you mentioned my time at the Texas Rangers last year. They had a job open. Mm-hmm. And I elected to not even apply for it because I didn't want to leave Pittsburgh.
Wow.
I love it here. Part of it was my age, and my family is from Pittsburgh. I didn't want to start over at my age, in my late 40s, start a whole life over again in a new city where the cost of living is significantly higher than it is in Pittsburgh. But I wanted to have a chance to kind of reset myself in this city. I'm a homeowner in the city of Pittsburgh. My family's in Philadelphia, where I can just get in the car and drive home, and I have 2 young nieces that I want to remain close to,
of course,
for my entire life. So it kind of drugged me in, and I really, quite honestly, don't want to leave Western Pennsylvania, regardless of what I do for the rest of my career.
That's awesome. And speaking of your career, you did spend some time with the Rangers, like you were talking about. I spent about a year with them. What's next for you? What's next in your career, since you are wanting to stay here in Pittsburgh?
Yeah. So in terms of a full-time job and what I'm going to do next, I don't know that answer at this time. I'm writing a book right now. It's called Sacred Grounds. I traveled with a digital camera for the last 8 years of my career in baseball, and I've always had a passion for ballparks. So I took photos of every ballpark and decided to turn it into a book. So it's a coffee table photo book with pictures and stories from those associated with each ballpark, whether it's a big moment or whether it's the everyday experience. And then we're kind of trying out a new concept. We're going to have QR codes in each chapter of the book, with each ballpark being a chapter. And then we're going to, that's going to link to a website with thousands more photos, longer versions of stories, podcasts, blog entries, feature stories, all kinds of stuff. So that's my own personal project that I've kind of started given my years of experience in the game of baseball. So that's the first thing I'm doing. And eventually I'd like to get into opinion talk. It's not something I've ever been able to do in my career. I've always worked for a TV network where you're kind of hamstrung with what you're allowed to say and directions you're allowed to go without getting your wrist slapped by Big Brother. And I always wanted to get into opinion, but I don't want to do sports. I want to do news.
Ooh, news.
I want to get into news, politics, current events, specifically local politics, because we have a real problem here in the city of Pittsburgh with the way it's run.
Yeah, we do.
And the way it's taken just a complete nosedive. And hopefully those of us locally in the media here, and if we have a chance to do it, whether it's via a podcast or a chance to get a job, picking up some shifts on a local station or whatever it may be, it's just something I've always aspired to do. So that's still in the works, but this book is a full-time undertaking, and I don't know how anybody does it with a full-time job.
Yeah, no, I've never written a book before, but I can only imagine how all the trials and tribulations of actually sitting there and going through everything. Do you think
I worked 16 years in Major League Baseball.
16.
I've never worked as hard in baseball as I am right now writing this book.
Right.
I can work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and still not get enough done. That's how much of an undertaking it is to do something like this. But if you ever get the chance to do it, I hope you do in your life.
Absolutely.
Once you get enough experience, because it's a real good chance to learn different mediums. I've had the chance to do television. I've done some radio, and now I get a chance to work on my writing. So it's hard to be good at writing, radio, and television. So I'm trying to strengthen the other two parts of media. So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's so cool. I actually have a friend named Kevin Homa, and he writes in his free time, and he writes really good novels and like really good fictional stories. And he works full time doing HVAC 5 days a week, 40 plus hours. I'm like, how do you have time to write so well and also be able to do HVAC? And he's just like, it's just a passion thing. So
that's what I was going to say.
It's just a passion.
This has become a true passion project for me because I get a chance to look back and talk about the experience at each ballpark and what it's like. And I've been so fortunate to make my living traveling to all 30 ballparks around Major League Baseball, and I've had a chance to experience all 30 ballparks. And Oakland does count as a ballpark, obviously, because the A's are about to move to Sacramento for a couple of years before they find out their long-term home. Hopefully in Vegas for them, but that's not finalized at the time of this recording of the podcast. But it's really become a passion of mine to talk about ballparks and what the ballpark experience is.
Do you think we can maybe get a sneak peek at one of the stories, maybe revolving the Pirates here? Is there anything that specifically about the Pirates that's in the book?
Well, it's specific to all 30 ballparks, absolutely.
All 30
So I'll
ballparks.
tell you one story.
Of course.
I don't know if you remember, again, you might be too young, but do you remember a guy named Jack Wilson?
Name rings a bell.
He was a slick fielding infielder, second baseman, shortstop. Freddie Sanchez, second baseman. I had that backwards. So Jack Wilson was a shortstop for the Pirates, and just one of the slickest fielding infielders they've ever had in the history of the franchise. Jack's first ever home game of his career was the first day PNC Park opened in 2001. So he talks about what that experience is like in playing the first ever game at PNC Park and how cool it was for him, and playing the first game in what is widely known as the most beautiful ballpark in all Major League Baseball. So that's one of them. I talked to Matt Capps, Neil Walker, Clint Hurdle about calling PNC Park their home. We talk a lot about the 2013 wild card game, the Johnny Cueto game when he dropped the ball and Russell Martin hit the homer right after that. Yep. So a lot of cool stories, and you're going to see a lot of that from around Major League Baseball. A lot of anecdotes. So the the book is relevant to all 30 baseball cities and has cool anecdotes and stories throughout it.
I'm going to minus off PNC Park here because both of us are pretty biased.
I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
What is, I guess, probably your favorite stadium you've been to then, since you have this all in your book?
It's interesting, Austin. It's very interesting you asked that question, and my mind has changed since I've written this book. And I'm going to say Baltimore.
Ooh, okay.
Because it opened in 1992, and it's timeless. The ballpark is 33 years old here in 2025. And we spoke to the lady, Janet Marie Smith, who designed Camden Yards. And when you look at the architecture, you look at the warehouse, you look at the way the Orioles preserve their history, they have such a deep, rich history of baseball in the city of Baltimore. There are other ballparks that are beautiful. AT&T Park in San Francisco is gorgeous. Kansas City with the fountains is amazing.
Yes.
I really like Target Field in Minnesota. I had a chance to work the first 3 years there. Cleveland even has a nice ballpark. You walk in, and you kind of got to go down into the stadium, which is kind of cool. There's just so many beautiful ballparks around baseball, but if I had to guess, I would say Baltimore is probably my favorite. And I wouldn't have said that before I started writing this book.
Wow. So the book really made you like sit down and actually think and look through each of those stories. That's actually so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have possibly a date on when this book is going to be released?
Oh,
when
I
people
exactly
can
do.
find
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, March 27th, 2025. We're going to launch for the pre-sale, and then the physical book is going to launch sometime in mid-September, somewhere around there. Mid to late September is what we're looking at to get the to get the book published and back from the printer and have physical copies in hand.
Awesome. Is there going to be a website or a place
Yeah, my
that
website.
our fans can listen to it?
Yeah.
Cool,
Robby
cool.
Ince, ROBBYINC.com. Robby Ince, ROBBYINC.com. So any of you out there, if you love the game of baseball, buy it for a loved one, read it for yourself. It's going to be $55 because the production costs are high.
Absolutely.
It costs a lot to get it. So it's a little bit pricey, but it's a beautiful coffee table photo book that is going to be highly produced with great pictures, color, stories, everything. And then the website, you're going to be able to get lost in baseball. If you want to read for 5 minutes, read for 5 minutes. You want to read for 5 hours, you can read for 5 hours too.
That's so cool. Don't be a Jagoff. Go buy the book.
You heard Austin. Don't be a Jagoff, all right?
Yeah, let us be the Jagoffs for today.
Yeah.
We're the two Jagoffs.
Yeah. Honorary Jagoff for today. I love it.
Yeah, unfortunately, our second Jagoff, Lucas Kuhn's, couldn't be here, but I actually do have a couple questions prepared from him.
He's a real Jagoff too.
He is a real Jagoff. I mean, oh my goodness, you should hear the stuff he says about me on this podcast.
What does he say?
He just likes to go at me. We have like this little back and forth banter that we normally do. We actually recently did an episode called Lucas Carries. I don't know why I let him do it, but I said, you know what, Lucas? I've been running the podcast for the last 2 years.
Right.
I'm going to let you run the episode for today. I'm not going to prepare a damn thing. I'm going to have a blank piece of paper.
That's good.
And you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Ended up being an hour and 40 minutes. It was actually one of our best episodes we've ever done.
Really?
But it ended up being a little out of hand. Let's just say we started joking around a lot.
You need to put his ass in line. You tell me.
I will definitely let him know.
Happy
He's
to set him
definitely
straight
listening.
for you. Lucas, you hear that?
Hey, Robby said it, Lucas, not me. I want to move over to this now. So we are here at Point Park University, and like myself, there's many aspiring broadcasters out there, many people that want to get into the broadcasting field. If they were listening right now, what advice would you give them on getting started with this journey?
You know, I get asked this question a lot. And I just spoke to another local university. Am I allowed to mention another university?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
of course.
Duquesne University, Professor Bob Healy, he does a tremendous job. He is spectacular with the way he structures and runs his broadcasting classes. Excuse me. And I've had the opportunity to speak to his class. I want to say at least 3, probably 4, maybe 5 times I've spoken his class. Just did it last week. And, you know, I was so fortunate to have so many great mentors in this business. Brian Baldinger is one. Kurt Menefee, who hosts the NFL on Fox, is another. Mike Goldberg is a MMA broadcaster for a long time. Used to broadcast UFC matches with Joe Rogan. Now he does Bellator fighting. All these people have given me opportunity and given me advice and talked to me and kind of laid out a path for me, for a kid who never took one single broadcast class in his entire life. And the biggest thing that Dave said to me, and these people have a lot of money, they have big fame, big name recognition, big followings on social media. But when I asked them, how can I ever pay it back to you for what you did for me? The number one thing they all say is do it for the next generation. Do it for somebody that's coming up and trying to find their way. So me personally, it's my mission to go on every podcast that a kid asks me to do. Whenever a teacher asks me to speak to their class, if a student reaches out to me with a question, or if they need a reference for something, or they need me to connect them to someone, we're always happy to do it, because there were some big time announcers that did it for me in my formative years in the business. So the advice, and again, this is what was given to me, and I try to pass forward. It's not that I'm the expert or I'm some famous person in the broadcasting world, because I'm not. But I've been very fortunate to spend 16 years as a broadcaster in Major League Baseball. And the number one thing that I learned is repetition is repetition. Reps are reps. Yeah. And you right now, as a kid with a page full of notes, sitting upright, talking fast, right? Look at yourself a year from now. You're going to be significantly better than you are now.
Thank you.
And when you watch your tape, when you look at where you are now from where you were even a couple months ago, you're better now than you were a couple months ago. And that's a case for almost every single person that is in this business that gains experience. So I just say, get as many reps as you possibly can, work as much as you can, own your mistakes, and then try to learn from them and try to be better with them. but get as many reps as you possibly can do. You doing this podcast as a student, you're already leaps and bounds ahead of where I was when I was your age. If that makes sense. So these reps that you're getting are priceless. You might not be making any money at this point in time, or you might not be making enough money at some point when you get your first broadcasting job. But those reps that you're getting are priceless, and you're going to get better and not even realize how much better you are getting.
That is some great advice right there. And I hope so many students out there that are listening actually take that with a grain of salt, because that right there could honestly take you to the next level. And that's something that, personally speaking, if you don't mind me going on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually have been working on this podcast for about 2.5 years now.
Yep.
Funny story. I've told it before on the podcast, but I'll tell you since it's your first time here. I did not really know what I wanted to do coming out of high school until I started covering sports. So I was the football announcer for the varsity football team for a while.
Right.
I was the statistician for the varsity basketball team. So I travel with the team, do stats. And that's actually how I taught myself basketball, because I didn't know anything about basketball until my senior year of high school. And I physically taught myself by keeping the stats with the team. And that summer, right after I graduated high school, my mom and dad, they threw me a graduation party. And they said, okay, all the money that you make, Austin, you're going to save it, and you are going to use it for your college money, for your tuition and your textbooks.
Right.
And I told them, I was like, actually, guys, I have an idea of starting a podcast, and the equipment is going to be a couple $100, close to $1,000. And that's about how much I got from the graduation party. And they said, no, there's no way you're about to spend your tuition money on podcast equipment. Well, let's just say I went behind my parents' back, which is one of only 2 times I've ever done that in my entire life. I invested in the podcast equipment, and I'm happy to say a couple years later, we've had so many big name guests on, like yourself. We've actually had 1 or 2 sponsorships in the past. We have about 6,000 listeners on 4 different platforms. So I'm very blessed for that. And I'm very blessed for people like you taking the time out of your day to come.
I want to tell you something, and I'm really glad to hear that story, because you raise a great point. And this is a message even to your parents, and this is something to tell other parents out there that may feel the same way. Your parents are looking out for you.
They are.
They didn't make the wrong decision, and they did not steer you in the wrong direction.
Nope.
Do your parents work in broadcasting?
They do not.
Okay. So that illustrates my point. And I say this with nothing but respect for your parents, right? Because they obviously have raised a wonderful kid.
Thank you.
But sometimes you just maybe have to tweak the message a little bit.
Of course.
Because I remember probably about 15 years ago, when I was traveling with the Timberwolves, I was addicted to the iPad game, Angry Birds. Do you remember that game?
I remember Angry Birds.
It was the fun way to kill time. You're on cross-country flights. You did your work. You can't fall asleep. You've already eaten. Nobody wants to hear me run my mouth. So what am I going to do to keep myself busy? So I started playing Angry Birds. And it was just a fun game to play in the beginning, and it was challenging, and it kept me busy for 2 straight hours on a cross-country flight. And it raised an interesting point. When I was a kid, I loved playing video games. And adults would say, these kids and their video games, they keep playing video games. But think about who created Angry Birds. How much money do you think they're worth right now?
Oh, gotta be billions.
Okay. So what if they spent their years playing video games? Did they do anything wrong?
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
What do you want to do with your career?
I want to get involved in broadcasting. So I've been doing a lot of play-by-play here at Point Park. So
hold on.
Oh, yes,
I'm getting to a point here.
Okay.
So with you buying that podcasting equipment, how much do you think that served you? How well did that serve you, investing that money in the podcasting equipment?
I think it paid off.
I think whatever you spent was priceless.
Yes.
You might have spent $1,000, but the reps you got with that podcasting equipment is priceless.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'll bet if you were to go back to your mom and dad right now and tell them what that did for you, I guarantee you the money you spent on that podcast equipment is worth 10,000 times more than had you spent it on textbooks or tuition.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you. And my parents, they've been the biggest supporters ever since I made that decision. And they were fully behind me. I mean, obviously they kind of batted an eyebrow. They're like, oh, come on, Austin.
With all due respect, they don't work in broadcasting. They don't realize what you are buying is worth so much more than any textbook would ever teach you.
Absolutely.
You get the chance to ask real life questions to real life broadcasters, and you're getting better every time you do it.
I appreciate that.
So that's a valuable lesson, I think, that I try to illustrate to people. You talk about what advice do you give? Go do it. And you haven't invest some money in podcast equipment, which at some point I'm going to have to do myself as a 49-year-old established broadcaster trying to find out the next phase of my career. That's something I'm going to have to invest in. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So you absolutely did the right thing by doing that. And that's a great story. And I'm glad you told it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I want to kind of ask you this because this also revolves back to my career a little bit as well. So with what I'm doing in college right now, I'm busy I intern with a professional wrestling company called IWC Wrestling, working with video production.
Right.
I do a lot of play-by-play calling college basketball, volleyball, just pretty much any kind of sport that's available. And also, obviously, the stresses of classes and real-life work on top of that. as someone who's been in the career for 16 plus years working with Major League Baseball, what was a day in the life of Robby like? What would you do on days of games and days of your shows?
Yeah, so typically, in baseball we work nights, and I'm on opposite schedules of the rest of the world pretty much. So we're night owls. Typically, we go to bed. If you ask anybody around the game of baseball, trying to get to bed by midnight, 12:30, 1 a.m. is really hard to do because sometimes you're not getting home from work until 10:30, 11, or if you have a rain delay or, before the pitch clock, before you had a 12, 13, 14 inning game, 15 inning game possibly, you can be at the ballpark from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to midnight, 1 a.m., sometimes later if you have a long rain delay and it's the late in the season and the teams aren't playing each other again. They're going to wait it out if the forecast is going to show clear skies in 2-3 hours from then. So we sleep in a little bit. I try to get out of bed typically around about 9:15, 9:30, 9:45, and sometimes that's a struggle because sometimes you're not going to bed till 2, 3 a.m. And then I would work for a couple hours, prepare my hits for that evening. I would send out an email to a very difficult producer that I worked with for all my 11 years with the Pirates. And he would basically tell me how much he hates my ideas and how much they sucked. And then so I would work from I tried to be on my couch with my laptop in front of me by about 10 a.m. each day. It wasn't always the case, but most of the time it was. Or if we're on the road, I'm at the hotel, sitting at the desk at the hotel for probably about 2 hours, 2.5 hours each day, prepping what I have. Send out the email. Then I usually go for a walk, eat some lunch, come back home. And if I'm home, either eat lunch at home or, if I have people in town or friends from the other team, pick them up and grab lunch with them. And usually relax for about hour, maybe hour and a half if I had the time, sometimes 45 minutes. And then get to the ballpark around 3 o'clock for 7 o'clock start. Clubhouse open about 3:15, sometimes 3:30. Opens a little later when you're on the road. You have about another extra hour and a half if you're on the road because the visiting team takes batting practice second. The home team always goes first. And then go in the clubhouse, get your sound for the pregame or in-game, kind of gather what's going on, see if there's any special guests, any anecdotes, any families of players coming in. And then go back, get a bite to eat before the game, and then slap some makeup on, put your tie on, and get ready, do a pregame hit, and then get ready for first pitch shortly after 7 o'clock. And then the game happens after the game, go into the clubhouse, get clubhouse reaction, win or lose, and then go home and repeat the next day and do it for 140 days during the summer.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And as somebody who really wants to get into a career similar to yours, where you're working live broadcast, you're working live games, a lot of people don't know that there's so much pre-preparation that goes into it, and there's so much pre-production work that you have to do, even if you're not working a camera or working a switcher or working audio and graphics. Like even if you're simply holding the microphone or if you're in the play-by-play booth doing play-by-play or Keller, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of preparation that needs to be have to actually do it. So I'm very impressed with that. That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And a lot of times you got to realize too, we're the ones that are on TV, and there are so many supremely talented people on the other side of the camera. Like you mentioned the switcher, that's for the technical director. You have a producer, you have a director, a graphics person, you have tape people that work in the truck. You have camera people, you have audio people, audio technicians, you have people that are pulling cable. There's just so many things that make a broadcast that go behind the scenes, and we're the ones that take a lot of the credit, but a lot of the times the people behind the scenes that make us look as good as we do.
Absolutely. And I actually learned that here at Point Park in my sports broadcasting class with a professor that you're probably very familiar with, Roger Lenhart Jr.
Oh, my God. Speaking of Jagoffs.
Speaking of Jagoffs.
Roger was my former boss and one of the greatest people I've ever been around in my career. He was the head of all the pre- and post-game programming. Man, I think he was there for probably more than 20 years or close to 20 years.
I want to say it was 24 from what he told me.
He did it for a long time. He's fantastic. And here he is, like you mentioned all the experience he has. He's never been on camera, but he's a guy that made a lot of stuff happen behind the scenes. And a lot of the pre- and post-game programming that you watched over the years on Root Sports and AT&T Sportsnet happened because of Roger Lenhart.
Absolutely, it did. And he was actually the one, funny story, this kind of transition to this, he was the one that introduced myself to you. You were one of the guest speakers that came in last semester for us at Point Park. And I got to tell you, out of all the guest speakers, I'm not just saying that because you're here, I'd say that to anybody else, you were personally my favorite because you stayed a little bit longer than Roger had originally planned, and you answered everybody's question in depth. You made sure everyone felt welcomed. You made sure everybody knew, like, hey, listen, just because you're getting into this career, you're going to fail. You're going to have issues getting into it first. But if you can overcome that, and if you keep putting 110% in every week, you can finally go somewhere. And I really appreciate those words of wisdom that you shared with us that day.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but think about this. You mentioned the word failure, and relate it to the game of baseball. If you fail 7 times out of 10 long enough in the game of baseball, you know what happens? You end up in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's failing 7 times out of 10. And you could kind of relate that to broadcasting a little bit. I can't tell you how many times we make mistakes on the air. You know, when you do live broadcast, you're doing live television for 4 hours a day, 140 days a year, 150 days a year for us in broadcasting. Mistakes happen. So it's a matter of, like, are you going to let it eat you up, and are you going to suck the rest of the night? Or are you going to suck the next day? Or are you going to realize, you know what, I screwed up. Okay. And while fans may quick to point out, run behind their thumbs and tweet at you and tell you how bad you suck, we make a mistake. We know we made a mistake. Like, I know I screwed up. Like,
yes.
I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm going to move on and be better the next time and work as hard as I can and try to make less and less mistakes. And you're going to realize that as your career goes on.
Of course, of course. I can't tell you how many times I went back and listened to a broadcast of me calling, like, a basketball game or something, and I just maybe mispronounced a name just slightly one time,
Right.
where I stutter a little bit.
Right.
And I start, like, flipping out. I'm like, oh, come on, I could have done better. And my mom and dad will overhear this, and they'll be like, well, Austin, like, why are you getting so mad at yourself? It's just one simple mistake. You sounded great the rest of the game. But it's just small little imperfections that if you can just fix and touch up, it really takes you to that next level.
Very few people have flawless broadcasts 100% of the time.
Of course.
It happens. Greg Brown, one of the greatest play-by-play broadcasters
Greg Brown, friend of the
I've
show.
ever heard in my entire life. Hilarious, funny, passionate, knows the game, knows the history of the Pirates, lives and breathes Pirates baseball. He makes mistakes.
Of course.
Everybody does. Everybody makes mistakes. And Greg Brown's one of the greatest broadcasters I've ever been around in my entire life. And mistakes happen. So you can't beat yourself up over it. Know why you made it first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a lack of preparation, that's a real problem because you're in control of your preparation every day. But if it's a lack of execution, you mispronounce a name or you misidentify someone, that stuff happens. But as long as you're prepared and ready and energetic and enthusiastic and have worked hard, just go be yourself. And when you make a mistake, know why it happened and move on from it and try not to make it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to transition and have some fun here
Yeah.
for, like, the last closing minutes of this episode of Two Jagoffs. So I want to get to know your favorite Pittsburgh restaurants because I'm a kind of a food connoisseur myself.
Boy.
You spent 16 years covering Major League Baseball, 11 of them here in Pittsburgh. Is there a go-to spot that Robby has?
Oh, boy. I'd have to think about that. Like, do you mean in terms of casual, formal? I guess anything really, right?
Just anything, just a go-to spot. Like, if you're, like, really hungry, you're in Pittsburgh, maybe you're working a game or whatever, and you just need to fill your stomach up. What's your go-to place?
Man, there's a lot that I would go to.
If you have a couple, that's totally cool.
Yeah, no, I love going to Amels in Baldwin Township. Mike Ryland, a friend of mine, owns Amels. There's a lot of underrated places. My hangout for a long time, and still is, Mario's in the South Side. I know I'm getting a little old for a young college place, but a lot of my buddies in their 40s, 50s, we still hang out there. We drink beers, but one of the underrated aspects of that place is their food. It's bar food, no question, but it's really, really good. Really, really good food. I loved Giovanni's Pizza, a favorite of Roger Lenhart. So for pizza, and pizza's always a hot topic in Pittsburgh, but it's just my personal opinion. I love Giovanni's Pizza. I love their the garlic butter that they have. Amels is really good. I like going to Bloomfield Pleasure Bar and Restaurant, good little pasta place. You can stuff your stomach there, stuff my face there, which is a really good place. Coughlin's Law just opened a new location up in Mount Nebo. They have spectacular food up there. There are so many places you can go in Pittsburgh and get a good meal that it's hard to really think about it. Now you got me thinking. Maybe, as we wrap this up, I might think of some more. But yeah, I like going to Amels. I like Pizziola Primo in Bridgeville. Real good Italian place. I really like Italian food.
Italian food, that's your
go-to.
go-to?
A ton of Italian options. I grew up in South Philly, so a ton of places in South Philly.
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh, there just aren't as many as there are in Philadelphia, but there are just so many good places to eat in this city, and we're very lucky.
Oh, yeah,
We're very, very lucky in Pittsburgh to have so many good places to eat.
Of course, especially pizza places. There's like a lot of good pizza places. Like over
What's
by
your favorite pizza place? Do you have one?
Yes, so you might not know it. It's in Carnegie. It's called Sunset Pizza. It's a local Turkish pizza shop, and I know the owners pretty well. And it's just, oh my goodness, they have this pizza. It's called the Meat Medley Pizza. Any meat you can imagine: bacon, salami, ham, sausage, gyro. It's all on there, and
Really?
that's probably my go-to at Sunset.
Sunset Pizza.
Sunset Pizza.
You want to sponsor this guy? Sunset Pizza? Can you do that?
The owner's actually a really great guy. Great guy. Maybe we can get a sponsorship going. If you're listening, let's go Sunset.
Why don't you send this podcast to him?
We probably should.
Flip off this clip, have them put on their social media,
See,
and tell them why it's so great, and tell them you're going to send me in there, and I'll tell them Austin Cairns sent me.
okay, I like that. And then maybe 3 months down the line from now, when we get the sponsor, we'll do another episode together. We'll have the Sunset banner in the background and everything.
Well, why don't you bring some Sunset Pizza?
We'll bring some
Eat it
Sunset Pizza.
While we have it.
That sounds like a great episode.
And you can drink out of that glass. And
Yeah, we'll get you a glass as well with your name on it so it can match.
mine. Yeah, can you call me a Jagoff on the glass?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. We can call you a Jagoff.
Appreciate that.
We'll have honorary Jagoff.
Yeah, honorary Jagoff.
Sunset's honorary Jagoffs.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
All right, I have one last question for you, Robby, before I let you get out of here. Thank you again so much for taking the busy time out of your schedule. Of course, we mentioned earlier there is a second Jagoff, Lucas Coons, who is on the podcast weekly with us. And his question for you is, what are your expectations for the Pirates this upcoming year?
You know, first of all, when you have a generational arm like Paul Skeens and then two really good arms following him in Jared Jones and Mitch Keller, and then you have Bailey Falter, who has proven to be a pretty good big league starter. Who knows what Johan Oviedo's situation is going to be coming off Tommy John surgery. And whoever, Michael Burrows, Bubba Chandler, Anthony Solomito, they got some young arms coming up in the system. And you have a pretty good lineup. Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz obviously are two big boppers in the lineup. A veteran like Tommy Pham, of course, Kutch is on the downside of his career, but he's still Kutch. Brian Hayes is a whiz with the glove at third base, best defensive player I've ever seen in my entire life. Hopefully, some other players can show some consistency, which, has been maybe a little bit of a challenge the last couple of years. I think David Bednar's 2024 was an aberration. I think overall his body of work is going to prove to be more of a two-time All-Star than it was a guy who had a rough go last year. This is my personal opinion and only my personal opinion. I have no knowledge of this, but I don't think he was fully healthy last year because I really think you would have seen better results had he been fully healthy. So I think they're going to perform well. I wish they had added a little bit more just because for small market teams, it's so hard to create a window of opportunity. And I feel like this could be it for them. When you look at, when you have Paul Skeens, who 33 times this year, you're going to have a chance to win. And you're going to have 33 times a year where you have a chance to win with Jared Jones and Mitch Keller taking the ball, and you have a couple other reliable starters behind him. I think they can make a run. It's going to be hard to compete with some of the big dogs, no question about it. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. The Cubs are are on the upswing. The Cardinals are starting to finally find their way back up after a couple down years. They've always had a really good franchise. The Phillies have made some big additions. So Milwaukee's always competitive in the NL Central. When you look at it, it's definitely going to be a challenge, no doubt. But I could see them winning, going over 500 and competing for a wild card spot. And if they get hot and everything goes well, and Skeens is hot and everybody kind of catches fire and kind of rides his coattails a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised to see them clinch a playoff berth this year.
Of course.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying I won't be surprised if they do.
I feel like what it's really going to come down to is whether or not they can still compete at a high level come August, come September, because it seems like the last couple of years they started off really hot. The 1 year O'Neal Cruz was looking great as well. Then he went down with that injury. And then right around the time where games start to matter, games start to come down to like the final stretch, they just kind of seemingly fall off a little bit.
Yeah, it's the extended losing streaks that really have come to hurt them. When they have these extended losing streaks, they're hard to recover from when you lose, 8, 9, 10 in a row at a certain time. It's just, at some point in time in the season, it becomes a math equation. It's not about, potential or emotions or talent. Sometimes when you have those extended losing streaks, it puts you so far behind the 8 ball that you have a hard time bouncing back from it. So if they can avoid extended losing streaks, they don't necessarily have to win 10 in a row here, 12 in a row there, but if they're able to, maintain competitiveness into, after the All-Star break and in the August and not just have that extended slump, I really think you're going to see a competitive team this year. So in terms of win total, It's always so hard to do, but I wouldn't be surprised they go north of 85 wins. I mean, they won 76 the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And this is a team that was winning in the low 60s the few previous years. You're talking about a 14-win improvement. You get to 86, 87, 88 wins, you could compete for a wild card.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Robby, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to join us here on Two Jagoffs. Did you want to leave the viewers of Two Jagoffs with any final words before we end off today's episode?
RobbyInc.com. Take a look at my book, first of all. And can you just call me a Jagoff before we go?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robby, for being a Jagoff and for joining us today.
That's all I needed to hear. Austin, thank you for having me, man. You
Absolutely.
do a great job.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You do a great job, man. I wish you luck, and I hope you have a great career.
Thank you. Thank you. I truly appreciate that. We'll definitely stay in touch, and I'll definitely send some stuff over your way. And again, go check out Robby's book, which will be coming out very soon. We're going to link the website on all of our socials as well, just so everyone can go check that out. Make sure you guys tune in this upcoming Thursday. We have a brand new episode with my dad and Lucas where we go through all of the news in the NFL world. Robby, thank you again so much for tuning in. Until next...
Lucas, you're a Jagoff too.
Yeah, Lucas, you are especially a Jagoff. Get the hell out of here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Until next time, we will see you all in the next one. Peace.